Good morning and welcome to all of you here at Journey Church and to those of you joining us online.
Can be rather frustrating to know that God is present, but not know what God is saying. How often have you and I pleaded in prayer, God, I'm scared, I'm not sure what to do. What am I supposed to be doing? Just tell me. Just tell me. I can say that for me, it really is almost a daily prayer from my heart. We don't talk about it, but it's definitely there. Our prayers tend to revolve around the need for concrete answers to those things that cause us concern. We tend to have a need for tangible expressions of what God would have us do. We tend to have a need for guidance to alleviate our concerns. Or more accurately, we need to tell God what we would like to have happen. Even though we ask for God's guidance, at times in our hectic world, it can seem like an impossibility to clearly hear what God's voice is saying to us. The psalmist offers that sometimes we just need to be still and know that God is. Carl Rogers, the great American psychologist, taught active listening, a practice of repeating back or paraphrasing what you think you are hearing and gently seeking clarification when the meaning is not clear. The psalmist, I think, is suggesting going even deeper than that. Seeking a peace that can only be experienced in the stillness of a moment with the Holy One. Be still and know that God is. It's all about listening. So here's a story for you. In one of his memoirs, President Franklin D. Roosevelt told of a time when he'd gotten tired of smiling that big smile and saying the usual things at all those White House receptions. You know, the goldfish bowl syndrome. So one evening he decided to find out whether anybody was paying attention to what he was saying. I often wonder that in worship. As each person came up to him with an extended hand, he flashed that big smile and said, "I murdered my grandmother this morning." People would automatically respond with comments such as, "Oh, how lovely," or just continue with your great work. Nobody listened to what he was saying except for one foreign diplomat. When the president said, "I murdered my grandmother this morning," with his big smile, the diplomat responded softly, "I'm sure she had it coming to her." You know, there are those times when we are so busy, so involved with our own thoughts, our own words, our own needs. Times when we are so busy trying to impress that we fail to listen. And I would suggest that we fail to listen to God more than to anyone else. The psalmist in Psalms 46 is singing the praises of God and how we have no need to fear. Nice words. But the reality is we do fear. The reality is we can become so caught up in our fears, so caught up in making sure that God is aware of our fears, that our fear does not need to control us or have power over our lives. I would suggest there are times when our prayers become reflex rather than reflection. Times when our prayers are forced out of our fears rather than blossoming out of our faith. Perhaps those are the times when we should reread verse 10 of the 46th Psalm. Quite powerfully and clearly, God is quoted as saying, "Be still and know that I am God." Be still and know that I am God. It's as if God is saying, enough already. It's time to trust with your entire being that I am truly the refuge, the strength, the ever-present help that you keep talking about. It's time to stop the chatter and begin the trust. It is time to trust. There's a story told about a weary traveler in the early days of our country who'd come to the banks of the Mississippi for the first time. This was a time when getting from here to there was still accomplished by walking or by horses. There was no wide, four-lane, concrete interstate bridge crossing the river. In fact, there was no bridge whatsoever. It was early winter, and the surface of the mighty stream was covered with ice. Should he dare cross over? Would the uncertain ice bear his weight? Night was falling, and it was urgent that he reach the other side. Finally, after much hesitation and with many fears, he began to creep cautiously across the surface of the ice on his hands and his knees. He thought that he might distribute his weight as much as possible and keep the ice from breaking beneath him. About halfway over, he heard the sound of singing behind him. Out of the dusk there came a man driving a horse-drawn load of coal across the ice and singing merrily as he went his way. Here he was, on his hands and knees, trembling because he was fearful the ice would not be strong enough to hold him up. And there, as if whisked away by the winter's wind, went the man, his horse, his sleigh, and his load of coal, upheld by the very same ice on which he was creeping. Like the weary traveler, some of us have learned only to creep upon the promises of God. Cautiously, timidly, trembling, we venture forth upon God's assurances as if the lightness of our step might make them more secure. The psalmist reminds us that God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. The psalmist reminds us that the Lord Almighty is with us. We don't need to be timid as we approach life, because God has promised to be with us. I think another way to describe what the psalmist is offering is the idea of confidence as described in the tradition of meditation. Sakyong Mipham Rinpoche writes in a book called Running with the Mind of Meditation. In Tibetan, confidence is known as Ziji, Z-I-J-I. This word can be translated as brilliance or to shine. Through the mind of meditation, we develop Ziji, or confidence. When we have confidence in the spaciousness of our being, discursive thoughts and emotions are not as problematic because our view has grown bigger. With this view of basic goodness and confidence that arises from it, whatever we encounter seems workable. I maintain that we will lose confidence. We will lose trust. We will lose our sensation of sacred presence. We will lose our feeling of refuge. We will lose our sense of strength if we don't take pause in the midst of the pressure to remember and experience the simple fact that God is. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. It is when we enter the stillness, when we dwell in the depth of the moment, that we can truly begin to hear what God is saying. So, what is God saying to you as an individual? I don't know. I have no clue. But the fact is, God has promised to be with you. Be still and know God. Is God telling you to pursue a particular vocation? I don't know. But the fact is, God has promised to uphold you, no matter how thin the ice is that you're on. Is the spiritual path you're on the right one? I don't know. But the fact is, God has promised you victory over all your spiritual enemies. And above all, God has accepted you, promising full and free forgiveness for all sins, self-imposed or other-imposed. I read somewhere a long time ago that there are some 8,000 promises in the Bible. God, through the voices of the prophets, the voices of the disciples, the voices of Jesus, made 6,000 of them. Those promises hold for each of us today. God didn't. God doesn't make them for us to creep upon, as if they were too fragile to hold us up. We can stand with confidence upon the promises of God. Be still and know that God is. Then is when you will hear God guiding you forward. Just a thought.